Hello everyone, I'm Charles Morris. Welcome to the second edition of The Journey, and happy that you tuned in at thejourney@2020.com. And my partner in crime, Dr. Robertson, we came up with this idea. He came up with the idea, and so we decided to try to put this together. Like I said, I'm Charles Morris here in Orlando, Florida, originally from Jacksonville, and been in the community for the last a long time, working with kids. And like I said last week, for some odd reason, the calling has been working with youth. Don't have any kids, don't know where it came from, but somehow or another God has pointed me in that direction ever since I was about 18, 19 years old, and that's what I've been doing for a very long time. So without further ado, we want to talk with Dr. Robinson. He's going to talk a little bit about the show and our guests. And Dr. Robinson, it's all up to you.
Okay. And good evening, family. I want to say that this is, as Charles said, the second edition of The Journey. And I'd like to say to you that The Journey is one that is a journey from me to you and a journey from you to me. And tonight we have two distinguished guests, and I truly mean distinguished, because they are, you can tell that I have done this a lot. I got even the microphone. But we have someone who is, both of these individuals are both good friends and also experts in their areas. First we have attorney Larry Culleton, and Larry is a prominent attorney in the Orlando area, but who is also part of the planning committee for the NAACP's conference, which was just held here in Orlando, Florida. And Larry, we're glad that you have enough energy left to be able to share that with us tonight.
Just a little.
Okay. And beside him, we have the lovely sister, Monica May, who has, in addition to a terrific schedule as a radio broadcaster, she is part of the Tom Joyner Network and is someone in Orlando who has been one of our most prolific and active community activists. And quite frankly, Monica, I don't know where you find the time with your other duties to do all that you do in the community.
Well, I will say that to whom much is given, much is required. So I learned at an early age that if you think you've got something to say, you better gather your words, get out there, say it, and do it.
And that you have done to our benefit.
Thank you.
Without further ado, I want to say that our community has just come off an emotional high, and some would say an emotional low, in terms of the Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman, I call it incident and tragedy, with the judgment, the verdict of not guilty for George Zimmerman. Our community is dealing with this very actively, and in the process of looking for ways in which to heal, to move forward, and to make progress in this matter. And so with that, our topic tonight is going to focus around what we can do, what the impact is, firstly, of all that has happened. With that, I'd like to start off with asking Larry, Attorney Culleton, based on what you saw happening with the trial, what your opinion is about the outcome of the trial, and perhaps a little bit about the process.
Well, it's always, John, difficult to predict what the jury will do. Regardless of what the presentation, how one might view how well the evidence against an accused is presented. I think we have a little bit more of an insight, though, into it because the jurors are talking one in particular. And had George Zimmerman been convicted, I think that within days of this one particular juror talking, his defense attorney would have been filing motions for a new trial because one could tell that some of what the jury discussed, the juror, at least indicated they discussed, including Stand Your Ground, really wasn't a part of the evidence presented. Now, it isn't that Stand Your Ground wasn't a part of the case. It wasn't in the sense of as a defense, because self-defense was. But what was unique about the case was that when Stand Your Ground was passed 8 years ago, it literally resulted in the self-defense jury instruction being changed too. To not just simply say that that a person was suffering grievous bodily harm or facing grievous bodily harm, but also if the person reasonably believed that he or she was suffering grievous bodily harm. And that reasonable belief, that opened the door. And that's really basically Stand Your Ground, to use deadly force. To use deadly force. And so I think that there's a lot we have to kind of mull over as citizens about where, is this really what we want our system to be? Is this what we really want self-defense to be? For all of Florida's history until 8 years ago, it was not. And so it has, Stand Your Ground has had a tremendous impact on numerous lives in Florida. The fact of the matter is that those who assert it, you can rest assured that the other person died. And so it is not just simply the use of deadly force. You're dead. I mean, and then so it's really something that I believe our citizens in the various counties as well as around the state really need to look at. And we have a responsibility, those of us who are lawyers or our community activists, to really set the stage for people to be educated about what's really going on in our state and in other states. Florida was the first to institute and pass Stand Your Ground. 28 other states have followed.
But why do you think that Stand Your Ground became so popular or was adopted by these 28 other states?
Well, it reflects the power of lobby in America and the moneyed interests. What you have going on is that the National Rifle Association pushed this, along with the American Legislative Exchange Council, better known as ALEC, and the gun manufacturers of the United States as well as around the world. Because there are more than 300 million guns in the hands of Americans across the country. Now that's like a gun, it's more than a gun per American, including children, okay? Because there are about 310 million people that live in America. Or well over 300 million firearms. And it's a moneyed interest. There's money to be made in the sale of firearms. And that is what we have to really look at. And what has been essentially sold to the American people is fear. Fear. Why would someone such as George Zimmerman have a concealed weapon? 5 of them. There are more than 1.5 million, 1,500,000 Floridians with concealed weapons permits in the state.
Wow.
So there are a lot of people packing out there.
Exactly.
Waiting for that moment.
Yeah. And our Florida population, if my memory serves me right, is about, what is it, 16? Is it 16 million or something?
I think it's more, maybe more, like 18 million.
More than 18 million.
Yeah.
Okay. And as you said, that's counting the children.
Yeah.
So it means that almost everyone who is eligible to carry a gun may be carrying.
And even those that aren't.
Correct. And I just think that while we have this moment, it is, as you said, a tragedy. A family lost their son needlessly, really needlessly. But let us, from this tragedy, seize upon an opportunity to educate our children and our fellow citizens about what's really happening, what has happened, and what they can do, what we can do to truly make a difference. This doesn't have to be our reality. It really does not.
Okay. Monica, you're at the pulse of so much of the community, and I happened to be in the back of the room last night as you were conducting a marvelous job with the community forum. In terms of the community and what you see and what you feel, there's what I believe to be a misapprehension that somehow we are going to riot, that the community is just going to somehow get out of control. But what's your feel? And you've got a good feel of what's happening in the community.
Well, I meant to bring them out to show you, but we have actual demonstration instructions. And when we assembled, we, as the leader of whatever area you were in, were given these instructions. And you are to implore nonviolence. You are to exhaust yourself to make sure that no one gets hurt, that no one is pushed, that no one says something that could incite a riot. We are there to chant and to march and then assemble at our ending point. I will say to you that marching with us in that 1,200 number on Wednesday was one lone George Zimmerman advocate who held up a sign that he had laminated with George Zimmerman not guilty and the picture of he with his family. And I will say to you that there were black people in the crowd surrounding him so that he would not be hurt. Because initially he came down at the beginning of our march to face off with the leaders. So what we're being told to do is don't make the bad news the headline. And you know, that goes back to the old days. And one of the things that I can say about Reverend Sharpton is that he's been on the marching lines with, you know, Dr. King, with so many people. So he has been the one that we've gotten marching orders from, that we are being told how to just handle ourselves. And you would be surprised, we as a people, you only need to tell us one time.
Exactly.
And you have elders, I mean, all ages were marching. I believe that all ages around the country tomorrow will march as well. We're here at the federal courthouse tomorrow at noon to do the same thing and to assemble and to talk and to hear some of our leaders in our community. We say we don't have leaders, but we do. We're finding more and more in situations like this with Trayvon that they are coming to the forefront. People that never thought that they had it in them. Who would have thought that Miss Gelzer, Lawana Gelzer, whom we see running on a different ballot almost every election, she wants to be a politician. She is probably one of the smartest women that I've met in this community. And she is rallying support for National Action Network. She's rallying support for a host of organizations that when you talk about getting to a point where we can change some things, we have to learn what we need to change first. And so Stand Your Ground coming to the forefront now, we have to teach our young people about it, because I can assure you, as we're Governor Scott's words today, it's not going to go away. It will not be repealed. There's too much money behind it, as Attorney Colton said. So what we need to do is not only stand our ground, but if there are changes that can be made in it, have the open discussion like we're doing, you know, on internet. Do that, so that the more we learn about it, the more we can say, maybe that doesn't need to be said like that or handled like that. Because again, who can prove it if that person is dead? So it, you know, there's some ambiguity there.
Exactly. One of the things that I heard last night, and I just wanted to check, was that I remember hearing a chilling statistic that every 36 hours that there is a black person that is killed by someone in a confrontation with law enforcement. And we know that there are law enforcement is there as a positive to help and assist us. But at the same time, I'm wondering if also that some of the biases that exist in our general society are also reflected in the ways that laws are applied to us, or confrontations, if you want to call it that, when we get into a situation with law, with authority and with law enforcement, if somehow we are at a disadvantage. And I ask that question with another part of it, and that is that there was a commentator who pointedly said that they felt that Trayvon had a part in his own death. And I just wanted to get both of your opinions on that.
And he had a part in his own death because?
Well, that was a question that I had, but I wanted to just get your thought on that.
Well, I mean, I've heard the hoodie, the wearing of the hoodie. Let me, I guess I'm going to answer it with an example, but it goes right back to the jury. The juror, I guess, 37 or whatever the number, she said that the demonstrations last year, she described the demonstrations in which we were all demanding at least, justice. That is, why hasn't he been arrested, etc. She described those demonstrations, which were all peaceful, as rioting. That's the perception. That if we are involved, there's something violent, something untoward. And so, because he was a black youth walking with a hoodie, although it was raining, he was up to no good. It was something untoward. That's not our problem. Although it becomes our issue when we are confronted either by a vigilante like Mr. Zimmerman, and that's what he was. That was vigilante justice. Of course, that wasn't said during the course of the trial, but that's what it was. And that's how, regrettably, that's how a lot of law enforcement treat.
Can I ask a question? In watching the juror on CNN, I think it helps us to understand just how her world is just different. And the inability to understand that, I think, is one of the biggest problems that we have as a whole. Because I probably can step into her world and function and understand it, but I don't think she can step into my world. And I think that's one of the biggest problems, is because we see things different. And her experience, just listening to her, and it's almost like you can't believe what she's saying, but she's being honest.
She's being honest, yes. But what that is, and this pains me to have to say it, but what that is an example of white supremacy.
Well,
because it is their standard that is to be the standard.
And that's,
and no other standard.
Right, and that's
the problem.
But why I say it the way that I say it, their inability, because some of them don't understand. They just don't understand the white supremacy and what that means, because that's the way they're wired. And a lot of times they don't necessarily mean any harm. I just think it's their ignorance.
Well, you're supposed to get a jury of your peers. I'd say that George Zimmerman got his.
All right.
Trayvon Martin never got his.
Right.
But were those people a jury of Zimmerman's peers? How can 6 women ever be on the same peer level as a 20-something-year-old man?
Well, the peer definition is really just more of, and they're your fellow citizens. They're part of your community. And
Seminole is made up like that.
Yes. While Trayvon wasn't a Seminole County resident.
No. And one thing Sabrina Fulton, his mom, said, if she would do anything different, she said, I would have never let him go to Sanford. Would have never let him go to Sanford. There were some things that you asked in that question, and I think one of the things that we're going to have to do is have more open dialogue. I think that Chief Cecil Smith coming into Sanford at this time, that was no mistake. They're really trying hard to at least put the front up that they are doing what they need to do in Sanford to not make amends, but to show you, see, we can do this, we can make this work. But if we as a community continue to act and respond the same way with no openness to communication, you're saying that she called it a riot. We called it a march. She called him a boy of color. He's our son. There is such a difference in language. There's such a difference in perception. And what they feel when we gather, they should be fearful in terms of there could be a riot. We could burn down some stuff because that would be flipping history over on them. Because if this had happened and roles had been reversed, something would have been burnt by now.
But isn't that part of our problem, that they fear us for whatever reason, that we're feared because, I don't know. I mean, there's a fear. I mean,
well,
I mean,
I have a theory, and that's all it is. and that is, they fear that we will do it to them what they did to us.
That's good. And see, and that's what I was saying.
Yes.
Something would have been burned down by now.
Exactly. And you know, it's interesting as we're talking about this, and I'm of the age where I not only remember the March on Washington, but was there. Even further back, I remember the impact of when Emmett Till, was murdered. I think I was about 6, 7, 8 years old or so, and lived in Harlem at that time. And I remember the impact, even though this was in the South, in Mississippi, the impact of that lynching, of that killing, had such an impact on the black community. There were some ripples from that time that I felt as taking a look at the Trayvon Martin incident. The difference, though, and that I think that this dialogue that we're having and the ability for us to, Monica, as you're saying, to be able to open up and to have the dialogue is really critical. At the time of Emmett Till's death, there was a great, not only fear in the black community, but there was also a motivation. It was a motivation that we cannot let this happen again. And although, unfortunately, there was a bloody struggle to get through to a point where we got the civil rights demonstrations, etc., it was a motivator. So part of what my question, to both of you is that is this another bump along the road, or do you see this as potentially a motivator for us as a community to truly come together, to truly do some things differently, and to not be victimized the way that we have been victimized in the past?
If I can say this before I turn the microphone over to Attorney Carlton, I will say that this is in God's plan for this generation. And I say that because the generation of now, and I don't only mean teens, I mean from 12 on up to about 40, this is shaking them up. This is shaking them up. Now, what they do with all of this is going to be very interesting. You found the students that slept in Tallahassee at the governor's offices because they wanted a meeting with him. Well, he stayed away from his own office 6 days to avoid those young people. But they waited him out. They're showing him that we have the tenacity that our mothers and fathers had. But we've got to keep pushing. I think that we are on the right pace. I think that we're headed in the right direction. I really do. I think for a moment there we were motivated by other things. But I think it's come back down to we will not stand for this kind of victimization any longer. Can we segue really quickly to the case that's about to start in September in Jacksonville? I don't think he'll get his marching orders. I don't think he'll be acquitted. I think that this will be a situation that set the precedent. What do you think?
I think so.
Monica, if you will, there are some folks listening who may not be aware of that Jacksonville situation.
In Jacksonville in November of 2012, you had about 4 youth pull up to, just to say, a 7-Eleven, but it was a gas station in Jacksonville. And you had another couple, a white couple, pull up. The teens were black. White couple pulled up beside them. And the teens, as they do, listen to their music bumping, thumping loud. How many times have we told them to turn it down? All right? Well, this white guy lets them know that he wants them to turn it down, that he's bothered by it. And he comes closer to the car, and I guess their words exchanged. And instead of him doing anything, going inside, whatever, he takes out his gun and he shoots the teen, 6 times, at least 6 shots. So that teen died. Jordan died, and he's 16 or something like that. That never should have happened. And he's using stand your ground.
Yes, he is. He didn't, as cowards often do, he left the scene and was found in Melbourne, which is where he's from. And I do want to go back to Mr. Zimmerman for a moment before I respond to your earlier question. George Zimmerman is a coward. That's what he is. He was a coward on that day. I can assure you that he never would have left his vehicle if he did not have a gun. I will assure you he would never have left his car. He would have followed the directions, and he knew that law enforcement was heading that way. He would have been patient, waited, or whatever, but he never would have gotten out of his car. And he's just a flat-out coward. And that is the problem with these guns. And I know that there's quite a bit of violence among African American youth with regard to firearms. Many of them, they are not obtaining them obviously legally. But there is a mentality among whites and firearms that is something that we just can't comprehend. At least I can't. I mean, they have this incredible love affair with it. I know why. And it goes back to the fear of them having done to them what was done to us. Because the power of the gun is what made them conquer and create genocide against the Native American who were here. It is the power of the gun that kept us enslaved, not just in this country, but throughout this hemisphere. It was the power of the gun that kept the Japanese interred. They didn't inter any Germans in World War II.
Interesting.
There were no Germans interred.
Right.
And in some of our communities, we saw German prisoners of war, Nazis, treated better than ourselves in America. So we've got a long way to go. What this is an opportunity for us to galvanize and really work together. That is my theme. That is my hope, is that we will work together. And that's not just blacks working together. That's whites working together, Hispanics, Native Americans, women, LBGT community, because there is an effort on the part, and I really, it pains me to have to say some of what I'm saying here, but I've seen the evidence.
It needs to be said.
And we do need to have an open dialogue. And one of the vestiges of slavery and Jim Crowism has been the church. The church has played a major role and is still playing a major role. Those folk packing those weapons go to church every Sunday. And they're talked to by their pastors. They're basically emboldened to be
what they are. They're justified in their behavior by God because of what they hear every Sunday. And it is time for us, all of those groups that I mentioned, to challenge who the face of Christianity is. It really is important. This is really a major part of the problem in our state and in our country, is the rise of the influence of the evangelical Christian, overwhelmingly white. And I just got to cut to the chase on it, because I believe this is where we are. Too many Christians, what might be considered moderate, I'd call rational, have just sat back and said, oh no, nobody's paying attention to them. Oh yes they are. Yes they are. And the examples of terrorism in this country have come more often than not from the white evangelical Christian. Shooting abortion doctors, assassinating them in their own church, shooting them outside their own facilities. That's a constitutional right. They're just exercising their constitutional rights. And I know last night I was seated next to someone who talked about Sharia law. And I only say this because that's something else. They use fear that somehow our country, because of its diversity, will turn away from Judeo-Christian values and we'll start having Sharia law. That's nonsense.
Now explain the Sharia law.
Well, it's essentially Muslim law. It is the law of Muslims. And that is, very few Muslim countries even have it. Saudi Arabia, and there have been some parts of Pakistan and portions of Afghanistan when the Taliban ran Afghanistan. You would see Sharia law. And it's very controversial because it's that eye for an eye. If you steal, chop off the hand. You dishonor, and typically women are degraded. I mean, there's a whole lot to that, but I'm just saying it's being used as a tool
for, again, to create a non-issue.
Yes.
And make it into an issue.
Correct. And John, you've just gone full circle to make a non-issue an issue. Stand your ground was unnecessary. It was unnecessary. There was no justification for the passing of stand your ground as a law. If in fact you had to kill someone because they were about to kill you, or you believed they were going to kill you because they had the means to do so, and you were in your home, you could defend yourself. Self-defense was there. And yes, even if you were out somewhere beyond the parameters of your home, you could defend yourself. You have the right to self-defense. All that Florida law really required was if you had an opportunity to retreat, you had a duty to retreat. That's all. And so now, no, you just stand your ground and shoot. Shoot. That's it. So, and I think that mentality cannot be the predominant mentality of our society. And I don't believe it is. But if people remain ignorant and they don't become aware of what this law really does, we've got to raise our game. We're no longer in the little leagues. This is the major leagues. Exactly. And this is not just for us, for our children, for those yet to be born. What is it that we're going to leave? You know, I've got a little gray that I'm hiding with various chemicals. And John, you got some gray there. And look, we're aging. What then is our legacy going to be?
To that generation
to come.
Exactly.
So and we've got to be examples.
One of the things, Larry, and I think that's a critical point that you just made, and one of the questions that came up in Monica, because you, I know, work a lot with children, you work a lot, you know, in the community with our youth coming up. There was a comment that someone I spoke to on the phone asked, she was a mother, and had I think a 10-year-old, and the 10-year-old said to her, Mommy, are they going to shoot me if I wear a hoodie? And that mother was just flooring. This was an intact family, mother, father, a couple kids that were, I think there was a 10-year-old and then an infant. And she said, well, what do I tell my young person? Because they were so afraid when they saw it over the TV, because again, this has been going on for more than a year and a half or so. I wanted to talk a little bit about what can we tell our young people? What can we let them know to expect as they're coming up? How do we prepare them?
You know what? That's a good question. It's a loaded question because we're just in the bullying phases right now in developing how do we handle bullies. If you remember the educational expert that spoke last night, she said we're now training people to stand up to bullies and just to stand up for themselves. We were just getting to that point and getting comfortable with the variations of training people on how to deal with peer-to-peer bullying. How can you prepare yourself or your child for George Zimmerman? How can you prepare your child who's taking out the trash and a 70-something-year-old white neighbor confronts them about stolen weapons and the young boy says, I didn't take your gun. And he gets shot to death right there. Okay, you can't prepare them for the craziness or the behaviors or you just cannot. So what you do is you just pray for them and with them every day and over them every day. There is a wild, wild west feel to our country right about now. And I remember when she was chief of police, Val Deming saying, if this law is changed from castle doctrine to stand your ground, that's what we were going to have. So it's black on black crime continues on, but now we have the added vulturism of this. So how do you? We try to prepare our kids when they leave our house, at night, especially if they're older teens, stay with the crowd. If there's ever a fight or whatever, you go the opposite way. If you hear guns, you run away from that situation. I mean, we can talk about things like that. We know about things like that. But how can we be prepared for the mindset, the psyche of somebody that's destined to shoot?
Dr. Robinson, if you remember, just the other night when I called you, and my friend Erica, that lives in Oakland, California, I had actually been on the phone probably about an hour before I called you, and she actually had tears in her eyes because when her son came to her, she has a 10-year-old son, and the son asked, Mommy, I can't wear a hoodie? And she was frustrated because she felt as a mother she had failed her son because she felt she couldn't give him an answer that he could understand. Or even if he was out and about, she felt that there was nothing that she could tell him because she didn't understand. So now she's starting to feel as if though she's failing him as a mother. And that's when I called Dr. Robinson. I said, okay, so we need some help now. But once you talk about that briefly, and for some of the other people out there that's dealing with that based on what you just said.
Exactly. And, we live in a violent time and in a treacherous time. The thing that I remember in coming up, though, and is having my father sit down and give me the talk. And the talk was, again, not about sex. It was about how to handle myself when I was out about in the community, and how I was to handle myself when I went downtown, out of Harlem and in the area. And I think that almost every black father, and again, in my generation, that just about everybody did that. In our younger generation, I think at times because we have gotten caught up in the hype that we no longer, have to, guard our children against the crazy kind of circumstances, against the incidents of racism that they run into when they're least expecting it, when they are stopped, and in New York there is this whole I call it stop and frisk, law that is coming into place where the overwhelming number of young people that are stopped are black, or Latino. We have to prepare our children as best as we can, letting them know that they need, in our young elementary school kids, we talk about stranger danger. We need to, with our teens, also talk about stranger danger to them also. Let them know that they need to, again, if there is a way out of the situation, to back out and back off. Often, in many of the hip-hop songs, there is the sense of being confrontational. And again, in my old age, I listened to some hip-hop, by the way, and there is a lot of good that's in it, as well as a lot of insanity. But what I would say is that we need to let our kids know the reality that this is a tough world out there, that there are some people that are going to be looking to hurt them without them intending to be hurt, that we need to, again, as much as possible, let them know that they need to not be alone in situations. And yes, it's unreasonable that we should have to take extra precautions. But I would say until our society changes from this Wild West mentality, to preserve our young people, we need to be telling our young boys, we need to be telling our young girls that you need to be alert, aware, and utilizing not only some common sense, but some extraordinary sense in making sure that you don't get into situations. And yes, there's going to be some of the unavoidable instances, like happened with this 7-year-old old man. And unfortunately, that will happen. Just as in one of the safest communities, that when they went into this school, that was in this almost lily white community, in I think it was Massachusetts, was it, where they killed the 26 Newtown, Connecticut. Okay, and you would think that in that environment, that you shouldn't have to worry about that, but you're going to get individuals who are mentally unstable that are there. And one of the things I want to wind back to our community, we have, both outside of the community, and some of the statistics that are represented, some individuals who are mentally unstable, who are walking around and who are being encouraged in some of their dysfunctional behavior by the ethos of carrying a gun, the firearms philosophy of shoot first and ask questions later, and I believe also, and this is my own opinion, that the example of George Zimmerman gives them a little bit more assurance that if instead of having that second thought and saying, well, do I need to again shoot first before even thinking? So go ahead.
You may be right about the latter point you made. If I can just comment on Newtown for just a split second. Our country, England is similar with diversity, not as large as we are. Japan, not as large, but West civilized, a very industrialized society. Neither one of those countries have this level of violence, this level of gun violence. The same as in Canada. Don't have it. What's the difference? The easy access to firearms in this country. Now people get upset in a minute. If they have it, they use it. This is we've got to bring sanity back into our discourse about firearms. We can't just continue to just say it's okay to have any weapon you want. It is not okay. And I think every American should read the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution. If there ever was a tortured Supreme Court decision, it was the one out of D.C. that the U.S. Supreme Court wrote, where Judge Scalia wrote it. And he spent 2/3 of it explaining the first part of it because he knew it was a problem. Because it says, in order to maintain a well-regulated militia, comma, the right of the people to bear arms shall not be infringed. We got a militia. It's called the National Guard. You can even call it the reserves. You can call it law enforcement. Think about where they were in 1789 as opposed to us in 2013. To load a musket, it took 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes to fire one shot. We can fire 100 rounds in 30 seconds. We've got to bring rationality and reason back to the discussion. And look at what happened. There was all this uproar and anger and angst and wanting to do something in December post Newtown. And in a matter of months, the moneyed interests, the National Rifle Association and the gun manufacturers bought off the politicians. Last night in our town hall meeting, I stand by what I said then tonight. Nothing's going to change if you have the same people in office. You have to fire them. They work for us. And in order to fire them, you got to vote them out. And that is the challenge for the next 16 months, is to fire the governor of this state, to fire the majority of the people who now are in the Florida legislature, both House and Senate, and make it one issue, 2 issues, whatever it is. Stand your ground is one of them, and we stand our ground. Either you repeal it or we are firing you. Put it to the test of the people. And we must organize the people. There are a number of young people under the age of 18 today who will be over the age of 18 by November of next year. We need them in the voting booth, excited about making a real change in our state. That's what I mean, we really have to galvanize and stay in tune. Don't lose, don't give up hope. Keep hope alive.
Keep that energy.
Yeah, keep that energy. From now until election day, we can make a difference. We really can.
Monica, you work with any number of community groups, and I know that you had mentioned the one again, Gelser, okay, and some of the work that she's doing. What are the kind of things that you think that, as a community, that we can do to really, as Larry is saying, make that difference, to really get out there and to change the kind of environment that we're having to exist in?
Well, to change the kind of environment that we're to exist in?
Yes.
I think you've got to concentrate on a few things. We've got to concentrate on the education of our young people. We cannot wait until high school to talk to them about the importance of civil rights, of just world affairs. You have to start in elementary school. You have to start as young as you can. You have to share with them the importance of them being important. They've got to realize that not only are they somebody, that there's someone in that signature counts for something in a ballot box. You also need to start educating your children before they go to kindergarten, and I said that last night. There are some basic standards that our children especially are missing. And if they would do, as I mentioned last night, at the age of 4 in September, if your child is 4, by the time school starts, they need to be in a voluntary pre-K. Because if we can get them socially ready, the education part will come. Kids are an open blank. They're just so open and ready. but it's the socialization that we need to work on, because our children spend too much time in front of that television and not enough time with language development. And until you can communicate what you want, the way you want it, we're going to forever be behind the 8 ball. So one of the biggest things, what was the one thing that people talk about the most from George Zimmerman's trial? Mark O'Mara and West, their examination of Rachel Jeantel. That's the one thing that, if that's the takeaway, we're crazy. However, we also were cringing as well. All right?
May I say something about that?
But I was going to, no,
Yeah,
okay, go
if I
ahead.
may. We may have been cringing, but that was a lack of preparation.
Well, that's what I was going to say. That's what I was going to say, and that was a purposeful lack of preparation. But she has an attorney. What happened?
Well, the responsibility rested with the office of the state attorney to prepare.
And I understand that, and that's why she was so ill prepared.
Yeah, and you know, some things change and some things never change. Look, I'm troubled by the makeup of the jury, but I want us to also look at, well, who made up the prosecution team? And then the judge, and then on the defense side, there was a black intern.
Yes, exactly.
What about the prosecution? Now, you mean to tell me in the Jacksonville office there are no top flight black prosecutors to be a part of this prosecution? Might have brought some insight, something that you mentioned, Charles, about, you know, sometimes it's the communication. Maybe they needed someone to relate to Ms. Chantel.
Well, see, that's what I was saying. Communication, as effective or ineffective as it is, it still is.
Right.
I understood everything well, just about everything that she was saying.
Oh, yeah.
But I think the thing that was missing there again was just that openness. That openness. And it was very obvious that she was being made a mockery of.
Right.
Charles?
Well, the thing is that I had a parent that talked with me about that, and she was talking about that in reference to she was trying to educate her son, because what she was saying that Trayvon wasn't here to speak for himself. So even in his death, they was trying to make him look like a thug. And because of Jeantel, that's the last name, right? Miss Jeantel, and how they tried to view her, so now you done stepped over the line into their world, as she was trying to say that to him. You got to understand that you can't be thuggish in the sense of with the pants down. There's a reason why you need to be educated, because one of the things that a lot of us can do, we can go back and forth. We can go back and forth. It's when you can't go back and forth, and when you don't understand that no, you shouldn't be speaking bonding, so whatever. And when you don't understand that world, and how now you're taking 4 steps back and just trying to make it. So even in his death, they was trying to portray him as something negative, and he couldn't speak for himself. So that was another, I guess, another way of going at him, going at her, as the way they see us. And I think as a parent, she was trying to get him to understand that, because he's 18, 19 years old.
And I think she was the last person, other than Zimmerman, to either hear or see him alive. And the fact that he died so tragically,
Right.
the seriousness of it should have made the difference, even in the mind of a 17-year-old, 18-year-old, a 19-year-old. Your friend died minutes after he told you this, quote, creepy-ass cracker was following him.
Right.
And I just think that that's the inability to recognize the seriousness and the significance of what the world was watching.
But that's the world. That's we understand that.
I got it. And that is the discussion we must have with all of our kids.
Right.
Because there is a disconnect. There is a definite disconnect. And part of this is a reading thing, but she is trilingual.
Right, yes.
She speaks 3 different languages fluently.
I'm going to just comment on that, and I think that the point of Larry, as you're saying, that her perhaps not being able to convey the seriousness of it, in the reality that many of our young people live, and I can speak to this because I've seen a number of young people clinically. And I've had a young girl, 13 years old, tell me, "Oh yeah, my friend the other day went to a party and wasn't invited, and they shot him and killed him, and and yeah, I really think that's a shame." And I said, "Well, you actually saw them shoot him?" "Yeah." "And what did you do?" "And well, my friends and I, we figured we better go home at that point." And I said, "Well, didn't anybody call the police or?" "Well, I guess somebody did." So there is a disconnect. There is something lacking that's there. And it is about the quality of our humanness, the quality of something that has been part of us as a people throughout slavery, throughout the Middle Passage, etc.
We have devalued our own lives.
That we have. And
when we devalued our lives,
why do you think about the others?
so does the world.
Yes, exactly.
So that's why I'm saying this generation now has to put humanity back in life. We have to be able to touch one another. My pastor in Houston, Rudy Rasmus, says he has a book, The Touch. We've gotten away from that. And in the line of work that you're in, dealing with people that are mentally depressed or schizophrenic or anything, touch frightens them. But there's a way in which to even touch someone that is paranoid schizophrenic that can calm them down as well. There is a sincerity that is lacking in our community, in our homes, in the way we treat people. Customer service lacks it.
You're right about
There
that.
is a certain, that's why my next life, that's what I want to teach.
Customer
service 101.
Yes, I know. It's something.
It's just you've got to realize that how important that is.
But this offers us the opportunity to really make a difference in all of those areas. Customer service, the sister.
Okay.
I did not use
Just
that. Even though I could have last night on several occasions.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
But I did not.
You did a marvelous
Because
job.
certain things you have to learn to let go of.
Okay. We got about 60 seconds. So the question is, what's next? What's next?
I think what's next for us is going to be to work feverishly over the next 16 months to get folks out to register them to vote, to let them know the importance of the elections that are coming up. It's in our gubernatorial elections, our House
And some of the Senate.
and some of the Senate, the elections that are coming up. Really force education and the importance of that. That's where we have to go. So the education and election, education, hand in hand.
I think it is about humanizing, as Monica has said, and really touching our young people and our middle-aged people and our old people, because this is a we thing. It is not. It's not the responsibility of the young or the middle-aged or the old. It's the responsibility of us all. And we can make a difference.
We can.
And I know we can. Let us not let this opportunity, the tragedy that has occurred, there's an opportunity. It's like, sometimes you're torn down to be built up. I think we can rise to the occasion.
Absolutely. And in ending our broadcast tonight, I want to say that the dialogue that we had tonight is the beginning. We are going to follow this up because the to-do steps of where do we go from here are critical. And I agree with the both of you, and thank you for the insightful kind of comments that you've made, because we need to continue that fight. We need to continue that struggle. And on the journey, I want to say to our listening audience that as we've said tonight, and is our theme, the journey is from me to you, and the journey from you to me. Good night, and we'll see you next week.